Every story begins with a defeat. The hero of the story gets involved in a fight, often not voluntarily, in which he carries wounds from it and has to leave the place at once, all alone and weak. But on his escape, he would fortunately meet an old man, full of wisdom, who saves the hero from disaster. The hero would then become a student of the man, complete his training, get to know himself better, and in the end emigrate, full of knowledge and fighting power, to the big world. He would then, usually, take revenge on the murderers of his family. This is how heroic tales usually go, but it is not always a human being who gives the hero his strength. Sometimes it is an animal, and in the case of the Turks, even a wolf. This is how it happened in the origin story of the Turks about 2 millennia ago. Not in Anatolia, but in the cold, seemingly endless steppe of the Turfan region in Central Asia. A young boy got into conflict when a hostile tribe attacked his family's settlement. The oncoming storm by the enemy soldiers was devastating. The invaders wiped out every inhabitant, except for the boy who managed to escape the battlefield. Half-starved and thirsty, he had set off north when a she-wolf found him. She led the boy into a nearby cave where the enemies would not suspect him. The boy's wounds healed over time, and the she-wolf fed him with fresh meat, which she hunted for him in the surrounding area. The environment was, after all, rich in vegetation, so the boy did not have to leave his home for the time being. He was alone in this world anyway, being the last surviving member of his tribe. Only the she-wolf remained at his side. When he grew up to become a young man, he united with the she-wolf and she became pregnant. But at some point during her pregnancy, the man's old enemies found out that he was still alive and sent their soldiers to the cave to kill him. The pregnant wolf fled north and found refuge in the valleys of the Altai. This new, higher cave and hundreds of acres of fertile soil in the surrounding area enabled the wolf to give birth to 10 cubs and feed them all by herself. It is said that her children were half human and half wolf. As they grew up, one of the sons named himself Ashina in reference to his wolf mother, Asena, and led his 9 brothers into the outside world. Whatever happened to the original hero of this story is not known to us. In any case, this moment represents the birth of the Turkic peoples, at least in Turkish mythology. The legend of Asena tells metaphorically of the period during which the Turks suffered a heavy defeat, retreated and recovered, and finally, in large numbers, dared to return to the wild world. Even though the forefather of the Ashina clan is said to have come from the Turfan region, the Altai Mountains have been the mythical home of the Turks ever since. A little further away, about 700 kilometers further east on the Orhan River in modern-day Mongolia, the legendary forest Göktürks is said to have been located, where the Turks were later to build their capital. Under the Uyghurs, this area was called Ordu Balik, meaning city of the army, and centuries later even Genghis Khan founded Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire, in this exact area. The Turfan-Altai-Ötüken triangle is ultimately of essential importance for the history of both the Turks and the Mongols. The wolf has been a sacred animal in the cosmology of the Turks ever since, but other animals, especially birds, are also an integral part of Turkish folklore. Ancient Turkic society was built on something called töre. This includes a set of social norms and rules that the Turks imposed on themselves many millennia ago. Whether these laws were written down at the time of the first Turks is not known, but töre has survived thanks to oral traditions anyway. One may therefore imagine a kind of common law, meaning a legal system that developed out of habit, but was nevertheless strictly adhered to. Part of the töre is also the relationship of humans with nature. In the view of the ancient Turks, all animals have their place in nature. From the smallest insect to the strongest lion, the existence of all animals is justified. Man must therefore not decide on the life and death of these animals unless they have to feed themselves and their families. Especially in and around the Altai, hunting and cattle breeding were of course indispensable, but people were never allowed to eat more than they actually needed. Waste and gluttony were strictly prohibited. This worldview is closely linked to the religion or philosophy rather of Tengrism. Whether Turkey originated first or is derived from Tengrism remains one of the many unanswered questions of the history of the ancient Turks. But what do the actual sources say about the origin of the Ashina? Outside the legend of Asena, a record by Chinese chroniclers suggests that a large crowd once emigrated from Turfan to the Altai. These people are referred to as a group of 500 Ashina family. The date given for is the fall of 439. These families were said to have been part of the Xiongnu Confederation, members of the state of the Old Huns. However, more recent research indicates that the origin of the Ashina is not in the north, but rather to the west and south of the Turfan-Altai-Ötken triangle. The name of the clan and some names of later rulers indicate that the Ashina were part of the Sakat, a legendary Central Asian ethnic group with ties to Iran and the Caucasus. A connection to the Indo-Aryan Wusu is not to be fully excluded either. Nonetheless, the cultural similarities between the Ashina, the Göktürks, and the Xiongnu, meaning the Huns, are so great that in Turkish historiography, the Xiongnu and the Göktürks are classified as being part of the same Turkic people. And since both peoples were semi-nomads of the steppes and followers of Tengrism, a certain continuity between the Xiongnu and the Göktürk era cannot be denied. Life in the steppe was tough, with all the principles of the Turkish Töre, which advocate a harmonious life between humans and animals. One cannot speak of a completely peaceful coexistence in the steppe of the 6th century. In contrast to, for example, the time of the Mongol Empire, there was no anarchic situation in the Eurasian steppe during the Ashina lifetime, at least not in the Turfan-Altai-Ötken area. Instead, a feudal system of ruling dynasties and ruled subjects was in place. The political affairs of the steppe peoples were quite stable, yet one cannot help but think of the situation as a sharp divide between the upper-class aristocracy and the lower-class nobles, including farmers and craftsmen. The Ashina were known for their skills as capable blacksmiths and strong warriors. The Ruran, or rather Avars, set the tone and decided about war and peace. Their ruler, the Kagan, was actually the supreme ruler of the steppe peoples at that time. Only the Chinese states could threaten him. But the ruler's family was small and dependent on the willingness of the smaller tribal leaders to cooperate. In return for the recognition of the Kagan as the supreme leader, the men and women of the lower nobility, called Bek and Begum in Turkish, received a share in the trade on the Silk Road and political protection against the enemies outside the Khaganate. If the subjects went to war, they were rewarded with their share of the loot. In this respect, neither the Ashina nor the other tribes in the empire were slaves of the Ruran. But they were not emancipated from the Kagan either. After all these years of fleeing and reconstructing their society, the Ashina family had stabilized their situation and consolidated themselves politically on the Altai. Military campaigns in the name of the Kagan were not uncommon, and the Beks of the Ashina were always at the forefront of all tribes in the empire. The Beks took advantage of their ability to forge excellent weapons and manufacture robust armor. They were thus superior to all the other tribes militarily. The Kagan Anagöy noted this. Sometime in the 540s, a young man named Bumen rose to the highest Bek of the Ashina clan. When the also Turkish Tile clan wanted to rebel against the Kagan, Bumen sensed his chance and put down the rebellion immediately. He then stepped in front of Anagöy and asked for his daughter's hand as a reward. But the latter declined and mockingly remarked, "You are my blacksmith slave. How dare you utter these words?" Bumen immediately cut ties with Anagöy, declared war on him, and overthrew the entire Rouran dynasty with the help of the Turbar prince Juventai. In the spring of 552, Bumin defeated the Anagui army in a decisive battle. Anagui then committed suicide and his family fled to China. Another part of the Rouran dynasty hastily headed west and would appear in Europe a little later under the name Avars. Bumin's victory over Anagui and his family is quite remarkable, but his greatest victory lies in the rearrangement of the political situation. Until the fall of the Rouran Khaganate, the Turkish tribes had lived alongside each other in a decentralized manner and without a common leadership. Only the Khagan, who probably did not see himself as Turkish, gave command after command. After Bumin took the title of Khagan, he united so many Turkish tribes under his banner that his new empire was even bigger than that of the Rouran in the first year. In the subsequent years of the 550s, the Ashina territory grew far beyond the old borders and became the largest steppe empire the world had seen at that time, even larger than the empire of the legendary Xiongnu. After Bumin's unexpected death, his sons and his younger brother Istemi took the lead. Their new empire was called Turk. It was the first empire led by a Turkic people that officially referred to itself as Turkish. The Ashina family soon reached its limits because of the many Chinese principalities waiting for them in the south, while the stubborn Kyrgyz and Uyghur tribes continued to resist their rule in the north. But in the west, the Turkish Khaganate expanded rapidly and without much resistance, probably because many Turkish tribes that had refused to accept Rouran leadership now joined the Ashina. The reason was as simple as it was profound. The Ashina were not a family that put itself in the foreground. Their goal was not simply to rule, but to unite all Turkic peoples all over the world and to end any misery in the lands of the Turks. Because in contrast to the Ashina on the Altai, these Turks had to deal with unstable political conditions and looting by other peoples. The Ashina would put an end to this now. As heavenly Turks, they conquered large parts of the Eurasian Steppe. The Chinese, Persians, and even Byzantines were soon to feel the stubbornness and national pride of the Turkic peoples.